Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Big Idea podcast. My name is Eric Bramlett. I am joined by Tammy Melchien. Tammy, how you doing?
I'm fabulous.
All right, good job. We can be fabulous. I think that's good. Good.
I was just thinking, I need to come up with more creative answers to that because you ask me that every time.
I do ask you that every time. Maybe I need to come up with more creative questions. That's also a possibility.
There's another thought.
We are giving you information with regards to a brand new series that's happening in February. There is an R in there, everyone. Let's not forget that when we get up on stage. When
And
we say
my birthday's in there, too.
February. Really? What day?
11th.
February 11th. All right. Mark your calendars. And it's 3 weeks long, and it is called Tug of War. So this is one of those big idea series that I think hits a felt need, and maybe tackles it in a way that seems kind of unexpected. So I'm looking forward to it. But why don't you tell us just a little bit about what Tug of War is?
Okay, so we're going to look at three different things that often feel like they're pulling us in different directions. But that actually the key to this series is that when you talk about faith and doubt, talk about worship and work, when you talk about convictions or compassion, the key word is "and" in the middle of holding the two of them together, and that the tension is actually can be a good thing or is actually the way it's supposed to be.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of them doesn't win and one of them
No.
doesn't lose.
No.
Okay. All right. I'll buy that.
All right.
And so then each week, I mean, the theme kind of hits that, but it's not necessarily a progressive
No, it's not.
series.
It's three different topics. The theme is the "and."
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead and hit the first one.
Okay.
And we are talking about faith and doubt.
We are, and living in the "and" means choosing faith even with your doubts. So in this one, we're going to talk a very common thing, I think, for most of us is that tug of war between faith and doubt. And we're actually scripture-wise going to use some passages here from Mark that two stories, one that follow each other, that I think are pretty illustrative of it. So the first one is they're on the mountaintop, and it's the transfiguration of Jesus. And you kind of look at, like, if you put yourself in the shoes of the disciples, you're on that mountain, you see Jesus like glowing, and you see Elijah, you see Moses. And
seems like a pretty cool moment.
yeah, this mountaintop, and in that moment, man, faith is so easy. And you draw parallels for us in our lives. We have those moments when God seems so real, or, the birth of your child, or your baptism, or what.
At least one of them.
One of them,
sure.
yeah. The other two?
I mean, go either way, but, they're all special.
But, you have those moments, and what we want to do is like Peter. Peter wanted to pitch a tent and live there on the mountaintop. Like, we want to be in those moments where everything is so clear. But what happens in our lives, in the story, they come down from the mountain, and the immediate next story in the Gospels there is, the father who has this child that's having these seizures, and the disciples couldn't heal them, and he asked Jesus, and he says, "If you can," and Jesus says, "What do you mean if?" And he goes, "Oh, I believe, help my unbelief."
Right.
Which is like the struggle right there with doubt. And so we're going to look at that as how we are a mixture of both. And actually, without the possibility of doubt, without the reality of doubt, you couldn't actually have faith. And one of the things we have in the map, John Ortberg talks about how he will do an illustration. He'll have a $20 bill, and he'll say, "Do you believe me?" And they say yes, and he said, "Okay, I'm about to destroy your faith." And there is a $20, not like me, but there actually is a $20 because once you see, you can't have, like, faith isn't necessary anymore.
Right. Yeah, faith is what believing in the unseen.
Yeah, and so then we'll probably do a little bit with the Hebrews passage about without faith it's impossible to please God. And so basically it comes down to, like, you're gonna have doubt with your faith. Like, it's impossible probably to be honest and not have both. But what we have to do is we have to choose which one we're gonna let kind of guide us in that
Gotcha.
sense.
So, I mean, I do think that a lot of people, when it comes to their doubts, they begin to question kind of the whole thing.
Yeah.
They say, well, if I have these doubts, it must mean that the whole thing's no good, or that I'm not where I need to be.
Yeah.
What from a practical standpoint, what kind of reassurance does this combination of faith and doubt give to a person who, maybe has never been told in a church that it's okay to
doubt. Yeah. And hopefully people leave with that sense of like, it's okay that I have this, but I can still choose to have faith even with those nagging doubts. And there's it's such a typical John Ortberg story here, that I could see us using, where you've got this, he tells a story where there's a plane and there's a pilot and a Boy Scout and the world's smartest man. And the plane starts to go down and they only have 2 parachutes. And so the smartest man grabs one, jumps out. He says, "Sorry guys, I'm the smartest man. The world needs me." He jumps out of the plane. So then the pilot looks at the Boy Scout and he says, "Hey, I'm old. I've lived a good life. You take the other one." And the Boy Scout says, "Don't worry. He jumped out with my backpack." That's such an Ortberg type story.
Yeah.
But making the point of, one of the paradox of faith and doubt is that it's the ultimate intellectual challenge, yet, the smartest people in the world can make the wrong choice, and the inexperienced young Boy Scout can make the right choice. And the point is, like, the plane is going down. And, everyone's going to have that moment, and you just have to decide what you're going to choose, because no one's going to know until they jump out, until they're on the way down, whether they grabbed the right thing.
Right.
But I also like, that, if you didn't guess, I used a lot of John Ortberg in thinking
It seems
of this.
John Ortberg themed or inspired.
One of the points that he brought out that I think is awesome, that is probably the landing point, is really the best choice, the best kind of reason for faith is that Jesus believed. And when you think about that, like, who is more trustworthy?
Right.
And so, you can decide are you going to trust a professor or philosopher? Are you going to trust yourself, or are you going to trust Jesus? And ultimately he believed. And so that'll probably be a landing point for us.
Oh, that's good.
So hopefully people will walk away from this going, all of this stuff that I felt like was wrong and that I can't get past, I can still choose to believe.
You can still choose to believe. You can live within your doubts and still choose faith.
Yeah.
You don't have to shut down every doubt in order to have faith.
I can have faith and still have my doubts.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. All right, I like that. And it sounds like maybe we should call Ortberg and see if
he could come.
If he could come
That'd
and
be
just
awesome.
kind of deliver all
That'd
this.
be awesome.
Okay. All right. We'll see what we can do. Week 2, Electric Boogaloo, and it's work and worship. And so now we're looking at this one, just by title alone, doesn't necessarily immediately
say what it is.
So it may require just a little bit more explanation.
Yeah, and when I think of that, I think a little bit, like I have someone that was in my last small group that always talked about, which this is a good thing again. Like, I need to come to church on Sunday because it's the thing that, like, kind of gets me centered, gets me right, because then I go, Monday through Saturday, and I'm,
and it's terrible and it's awful, but I get back on Sunday and I can right the ship.
And sometimes we tend to look at our life as like, Sunday is my worship, is my God day,
my Jesus day,
and then the rest of the week here. So really, this is a series that's about the worship. The Sunday experience is not supposed to be separate from work. They're supposed to be an and we are going to focus this on your vocational life, like whether that's you have a job, whether your vocational life happens in your home, and whatever that is, but and challenge us to begin to look at how do I worship in my work? How do I do everything that I do as unto God? And there's an old book, Practicing the Presence of God, by a monk called
Brother Lawrence.
Brother Lawrence, yes. Oh, you're good.
Caught it right in the
I remember he was like a dishwasher in the monastery where he lived, and he writes about learning to wash the dishes unto the Lord, learning to see every little task and how it became an act of worship. And that's what we're going for with this.
And this is kind of related to that sort of the idol thing, like you're always worshiping something kind of thing, and just really acknowledging that every day of our life is is an opportunity for worship, and the question is, who are we going to worship every day?
Yeah, yeah. And some of I know the art structures are listening to this. Some of them, like I've talked to Lucas quite a bit about this. Part of what we want to try to do is better define worship, so that it's not just singing songs and
Right.
And in church. It's yeah.
No, it's good. All right.
Okay.
I like that. We're moving along. It's good. Week 3, the last week of this series, conviction and compassion.
Also a title that might not immediately.
Not immediately, but boy, it gets you thinking. I have a pretty good idea of where it's headed.
Yeah. So this is the battle that a lot of us as Christ followers feel between how do I hold convictions about what I think is true and what I think the Bible teaches and the beliefs and the convictions that I'm supposed to have, and how do I also love people, especially when if sometimes I think they are opposed to those things or in contradiction
might
with
be
those
challenging
things.
them, might be
Yes.
coming face to face.
And so
with them.
what does it look like to because the other side of it is some of us then feel like, well, the most important thing is to love people, and that's true. And so then we like almost feel like, oh, I don't want it to matter what you believe.
Sure.
Or I don't, like whatever you is okay as long as we're all. And again, I don't really think that's a biblical worldview either.
Right.
And so how do we hold those two in balance? And
our conviction should not be a doormat necessarily for our compassion, but how do you walk that line, or how do you deal with that when it comes to people? We certainly see it in our small groups. You get somebody to come to small group and they say, yeah, well, I live with my boyfriend, and and so you there's a part of you that like kind of antennas up, and you're like, oh gosh, we gotta fix this. Oh crap, and then there's like, oh, I just said oh crap, or but and how do you sort of walk through life with somebody and love them, and treat them like Jesus did, while still being a person of conviction that says, hey, you know what, maybe that's not God's best for you.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do in this one is we're gonna look at John 8. And ignore the fact that it says it wasn't in the earliest manuscripts.
Because, what did they know?
Yeah,
really?
Anyway. But John 8, which is that great story, it's the woman caught in adultery brought before Jesus. And what I love about that story is, the key in it is the last line, where Jesus says, neither do I condemn you, now go and leave your life of sin.
Right.
But to me, the heart of that is, like what you see in Jesus' statement is he didn't go he didn't just choose conviction, what you're doing is wrong, but he didn't just choose compassion. He told her, go and leave your life of sin. He figured out a way to have both and one of the things I think that is so beautiful and key in this story is that he never said to her, go and leave your life of sin, until he had already demonstrated to her that he was on her side. And to me, I feel like for us as Christ followers, that's, like we don't really necessarily have the right to say, go and leave your life of sin until the person we're talking to knows we're on their side.
Yeah, that trust and that
and we don't get to decide for them that they know we're on their side. It's like, so I feel like that, Jesus showed that it is possible to have both.
Yeah. I think the other thing I love about that story is that it's one of those stories that we can really look at and emulate how Jesus operated, and it doesn't have like a miracle component that it feels like we can't connect to. All he did is he wrote in the dirt for a while, but it is that moment of getting to where she was and being on her level.
He rescued her in this situation.
Yeah.
But then he also spoke truth to her. And I do, the last paragraph on the map here, I do think we have an unspoken value here at Community, where we don't have to agree on all our beliefs, convictions, and that to be in community and on mission together. And in some ways, I want to celebrate that in this message, because there are a lot of churches where being right is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, there's a membership litmus test that has
Yeah.
to do with,
Yeah.
agreeing to certain beliefs and
Yeah.
constants.
And I do think that we are a church that says you don't have to agree with everything in order and to be in community with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something precious that we need to cultivate.
Yeah.
Now we need to also make sure that we still are a truth-speaking church.
Right.
But I don't know. I do think that is something about community that we can celebrate. In
Yeah,
this
and it
message.
also reminds me of one of the earlier, small group components where it's, treat them like a Christian until they realize they're not.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful statement that kind of combines compassion and conviction all in one place. It's
Yeah.
like, what does it look like, to be compassionate until the moment of conviction shows up, and it's an opportunity for you to step in. In a way, you're kind of, you're connecting to that person's conviction as much as it is that you're bringing in your own,
Yeah.
point of view
Yeah.
or established concept.
Yeah.
So these are good. I mean, I think what's exciting to me about this is, this is a great way to get our small groups really connected with each other and being able to discuss some issues and really hopefully break down some walls, some vulnerability with these small groups and get them going, because the thing that follows this series is our Power of One, our 1 year anniversary of the One Initiative. And so, if we're doing well in terms of breaking down some of those vulnerability places and getting people to really get to know each other and trust one another, I think that bodes well for a discussion about generosity, where some of those defenses go up and some of the trust is harder to come by sometimes. So this is a very important series, and even though it's only 3 weeks, so good stuff. Any last thoughts or other things to add?
Nope,
I'm not
think we're
missing
good.
anything.
I
All
don't
right,
think so.
it's Tug of War, y'all. So let's enjoy it, and I hope that we're able to brainstorm some really great small group and large group experiences. So for Tammy, I've been Eric, and this has been the Big Idea Podcast. So long, everybody.